Okay, so we're looking at the Acorn Activity. This is from Modified Biology. This is an activity that we started in class. This way, if you missed it or you're absent, you're able to go through this video and complete the Acorn Lab. So the sheet that you see here in front of you is something that you're going to find on Google Classroom underneath the Scientific Method tablet. And it also went through some scientific method notes that should help you out. So one of the things within the notes, we talked about what it means to observe something. So within this particular activity, you're going through and using observation skills. So what does it mean to observe something? So go back through those notes, think about it. You guys will be observing acorns. And when we observe acorns, we want to know how are they different from one another. So we're going to use our observation skills to figure that out. So what is an observation? If I tell you to observe something, what does that mean? The second thing that you guys were looking at, it says what characteristics cause some acorns to float and other acorns to sink. So whether or not they sink or float depends upon their traits or the features that they have. So once again, if you guys aren't sure what acorns are, here's a whole bunch of them here. We'll kind of blow them up a little bit. And some things that you guys should notice about them is some of them are small, some of them are a little bit larger. Some may be brown, some may be green, some have caps, some do not have caps. And all an acorn is basically a little embryo. It is a seed that grows into an oak tree. So we may see them a little bit better. They fall off trees during the fall. Maybe you hear them hit your car and things like that. Maybe you see squirrels digging holes and putting these acorns away for a later time. They're basically planting these little seeds so that new trees are able to grow. But that's what acorns are. So they all have different features. They have a cap section to them, which is the top part, which is what basically hooks them to the tree. And then the bottom part, which can be brown or it can be green. Sometimes we'll have a little point on the bottom of it. And that is basically the seed itself contained within there. Okay, so different traits or different characteristics that you may see within those particular acorns. So if you're in class, you'll have a chance to check some of these out and be able to observe them and touch them and, maybe smell them if you have to, and use those observation skills. Based on that, which characteristics or features will cause acorns to either float or sink, we're now going to create our hypothesis. So we're going to say acorns that have what feature or trait, what trait or feature do you think they have to have that will either cause them to sink or float? One of those words you will circle. So maybe you say acorns that have no caps will float because, so you would just circle the one that you want to go with. We want to make this a because statement, and that's what a hypothesis is. Now don't be alarmed, it does not have to be correct. A hypothesis is an educated guess. So we can say that acorns have what characteristic that causes them to either sink or float. And why do you think that? Why do you think they're going to sink or float based on that particular trait? Makes them heavy, makes them light, makes them big, makes them small, makes them green, makes them brown, whatever it may be. What's going to cause them to do that? At that point, we then get to our data table, which is the next step of our scientific method. We create that hypothesis. Now we want to go through and we want to collect some data. So there are 10 acorns that you guys are going to be observing here in a moment. And what we want to do is we want to look at our hypothesis chart for those 10 acorns. So 1 through 4 are on the front, 6 through 10 are on the back. And what you guys are going to do, I'm going to show them to you one at a time. And you're going to put a little hypothesis. You can either put an S or an F here. Do you think it's going to sink or do you think it's going to float? So either an S or F, whatever one. So maybe I think the first one's going to sink. I'll just put an S there. And then you guys are going to describe it for me. You're going to use those observation skills. Don't worry about my last 2 columns yet. We're going to leave them blank. We're just going through and filling out all our hypotheses for those 10 acorns. So I'm going to pull this form away, and I'm going to show you guys numbers 1 through 10 here for these particular acorns. So I kind of have them laid out. You will also see pictures of these individually on Google Classroom. So it'd be a little closer, you guys can kind of zoom in, but there are my 1 through 10 right there. So underneath that first one, we're going back to our little chart. I want you guys to look at acorn number 1, come up with a hypothesis, but first look at its characteristics, which traits or features. So here is acorn number 1 for you guys. So acorn number 1, let's see if I can bring this up a little closer on a piece of white paper for you. Acorn number 1 looks like this. Okay, so we've got a little brown and green there. We definitely got a cap on the one side. It's about medium size. It's got a little point on the bottom of it. That would be your acorn 1. So underneath that data chart, you want to put for acorn number 1, write in some characteristics that you may see there. And like I said, there are pictures of each individual acorn on Google Classroom that you guys can kind of blow up and look at. As we go through, and we're looking at the next one. So now we want to go on to acorn number 2. So with acorn number 2, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at its characteristics, and then we want to see, will it sink or will it float? So here is acorn number 2 for you guys, once he stops rolling around. So acorn number 2 kind of looks like acorn number 1. The difference between it, once again he's still rolling on me, is that he's a little bit more green. So if we're looking at it, I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit, pick him up, show him to you guys. So he's a little bit more green than my first one. So he's got a nice cap, he's got a nice little stem to it, he's got a point, he's pretty rolly. Size-wise, just to give you guys a comparison, there is acorn 1, there is acorn 2. So they're actually kind of about the same size there. Okay, the difference between this one's number 1 is a little more brown. Number 2 is going to be a little bit more green. Okay, so same thing, your characteristics. Then you guys are going back under your chart and you're going to let me know. Acorn number 2. Does it sink or does it float? So you're going to put an S or an F. This part should be filled out. Once again, you're leaving your last 2 columns blank. Acorn number 3. What you guys are going to notice about acorn number 3 is that acorn number 3 actually has a double cap to it. It only has 1 acorn, but it does have a double cap to it. So it's kind of greenish in color, as you guys can see there. It's got a little point on the end. It's about the same size as 1 and 2. It's got a double cap. So fill in your hypothesis, S or F. Do you think acorn number 3 is going to sink or float when we put it into a bowl of water? Based on the characteristics that you just labeled there. Still on the front of that page. If this goes too fast, pause the video and then start it back up. Acorn number 4 looks like this. So it's still kind of green in color, but what you're going to notice is a little different about acorn number 4 is it has no cap. So it's kind of like missing the hat off the acorn there, missing the hat off the head. It does have a little point on the end. It is green in color, but it has no cap to it. So far all my acorns are about the same size. They're about medium acorns there. So on the front of the page, we're on our last acorn for the front of the page. You guys are filling in S or F as well as characteristics there. Once you're done those 4 acorns, you're going to want to flip that page over and we're going to continue that chart on the back side. So when you get to the back side, we're going on to acorn number 5. I'm going to slide you guys on over to acorn number 5. There you go. So you're going to notice the cap's a little bit different. It's a little thicker of a cap. And you're also going to notice it is more brown in color. Still has a little point. Actually has a very nice little point on the end of it there, if you are able to see that. And that is acorn number 5. So once again, we are on the back side of that data chart now. And you are filling S or F. And you're filling in your characteristics. So I'm going to kind of fix this chart for you guys. I know you guys are on Google Classroom with this. Mine is desktop here. So once again, this is our hypothesis. We're doing an S or an F for sink or float for acorns 5 through 10. Here I want to list my traits that have allowed me to come up with those particular hypotheses. Acorn number 6, continuing in that chart. Acorn number 6 is a little smaller than some of the other ones that we've seen. It's got a nice brown cap. It's got a nice long stem to it. And it also has a nice point that goes along to it. But it is a little smaller than what we've seen with some of the others. So fill out your hypotheses, fill out your traits, and we will move on to acorn number 7. Acorn number 7. A little more brown in color. It also has a very nice stem to it. And it has a nice point on it. It's about the same size as 6, but it is more brown in color, where acorn number 6 was more green in color. So here's 6 in the forceps, 7 is on the paper right here. Go through, fill in S or F for number 7, as well as your traits. Do you think it's going to sink or float based on your hypothesis that you listed on the front page? Acorn number 8. Acorn number 8 is a little larger than what we had with 7. It's got a shorter stem. I'm holding it right by the little stem there. Brown in color, but it's got a beautiful point to the bottom of it. It's got the cap to it, nice brown cap. It's evenly rounded. And that is acorn number 8. Write your characteristics or your traits underneath number 8. Then fill in your hypothesis, either an S, thinking that that acorn is going to sink when we put it into a bowl of water, or it will float. Number 9. Number 9 is kind of a little acorn, but look at the stem on this particular acorn. It's a beautiful green color. It's got a nice cap. It's got a super long stem on it. So how is it different? Because you know that each one of these acorns are slightly different from one another. Go ahead and fill in under number 9. You guys want to fill in your characteristics, and then you'll put in either an S or an F. Does it sink or float, do you think? And then we're going on to our last and final acorn. Last and final acorn is this brown one that we see here. And what you guys are going to notice about it, it's missing its hat or its cap off the top of it. It is brown in color. It also doesn't really have that much of a point there. About medium in size. So list the characteristics or traits. You'll put an S or an F in that particular column for your hypothesis. And once again, just to give you guys a little comparison so that you guys can kind of see size-wise and everything else, there are acorns 1 through 10 for you. So now we're going to go through and we're going to fill in our actual table. So your actual table, we are going to fill in on the other side. We're going to say, okay, well, that was our hypothesis on one side. And now we want to look at the actual column. So this part is filled in. You guys have filled in your hypotheses all the way down from 1 through 10. You guys have filled in your characteristics from your observations 1 through 10. Now we want to find our actual data. So how do I do that? I need to experiment. How am I going to experiment? Well, our problem is, what causes acorns to sink or float? So that's exactly what we are going to do. So I'm going to take acorns 1 through 10, and we kind of want to go through and see, hey, do they sink or do they float? And I'm going to put a check mark in the actual column. So acorn number 1, we're going to stick him in, and we're just going to drop him into the beaker. And what you're going to notice is that acorn number 1 is floating right on top. Never even thought about going down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an X in the column for float. That is my actual data for that particular acorn. I'm going to pull him out, put him back in his circle for number 1. I don't want to leave him in there because then I'll confuse everybody. Acorn number 2, think about the characteristics that we had for it. So there's acorn number 2. We're going to let acorn number 2 go. And acorn number 2 actually is going back down to the bottom, and it's staying at the bottom. So those of you guys who can't see, he is actually at the bottom of the beaker, which means now I have to go out and fish him out. So I'm going to reach in, I'm going to pull him out of the little beaker, and he is the one that sank. So I'm going to put an X in the box for number 2. We're going to go through and do number 3. Number 3 was a double capper. It was a little bit bigger. So maybe you guys are going, it's bigger, maybe it's heavier. Let's drop him. Not even a shot. Number 3 is a floater. Even with that double cap, he's floating right on top. I don't have to go fishing very far for that particular one. So I'm going to put an X here in that float column. Number 4, green one, no cap. He's a floater as well. So number 4, put an X in that float column. I'm going to keep going. And on the back or the next page on your Google Classroom. So this was either float or sink. This was my actual data. You guys are just continuing that chart. Mine's a real copy, so it got kind of cut off there. We're looking at acorn number 5. And when I go ahead and put acorn number 5 in the water, remember that was our brown one. He's a floater as well. So I'll fill that actual data in. I'm going to go through, do number 6. Number 6 is kind of a tiny little acorn. It's green. It also sank. So now I got to start thinking about size. That was a little one. How come that little one sank and my big heavy ones, or what I think is heavy, did not sink? So I'm going to yank him out. Number 6 was our sinker, which is why I put an X in the sink column. 7. Ooh, 7 also is a sinker. 7 was a brown acorn. So that's kind of our first brown one that we had sinking. So maybe you said, oh, green ones float and brown ones sink, or vice versa. Well, now we got some of both colors that are actually doing this. So number 7, I'm putting an X in the sink column. Number 8 is also brown, kind of like the last one. He actually floated right away though. Didn't even think about going down. I'm going to put an X in the float column. Number 9 is the one with our extra little piece of stem there. We're going to drop him. Even with that stem piece, he is a floater. Did not go down. He's right on top, easy to fish out. And then we got number 10. Number 10 is a brown one without a cap on it. But one observation that maybe you guys didn't notice before that we're seeing now, you see number 10 here, he's actually got a little hole on the top where that cap used to be. Well, that's a little different than everything else. Maybe that changes things. He wanted to sink, but he came right back up, so he actually is a floater as well. So when we look at our data on whether you sink or float, we have some acorns that floated, we have some that sank. We actually have, out of the 10, we have 3 that sunk and 7 that floated. So as we go through these questions, it's going to ask you certain things like that. Which acorns floated? Go back through, number-wise. Numbers 1, number 10, which ones floated? You guys are filling those numbers in there. Now I want you guys to go back and look at all the ones that floated, all the ones that have that X in that first column. What characteristics, traits, or features did they all have in common? We wrote things down about them. What did they all have in common? Were they the same shape? Were they the same color? Did they all have caps? Did they all have stems? What did they have in common? Which acorn sank? So you guys will fill those 3 in. What characteristics did they have in common? They had to have something that they had in common. Why do you think some of them floated and some of them sank? So we said 3 of them actually sank. What caused those 3 to sink? What was the cause there that you think those ones actually sank? And then go back and look at your hypothesis that we did on the very front page. Was your hypothesis correct? And this is not just a yes or no answer. You need to explain why or why not that hypothesis was correct. Okay, you can say, yes, the hypothesis was correct. It was said that acorns that had these traits would sink, and as seen by blah, 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 that's what we see with my sinking acorns. No, my hypothesis was not correct. Remember, hypotheses do not have to be correct. It is an educated guess. but tell me why that hypothesis was correct. My hypothesis was not correct. I said that acorns that had big stems were going to go through and sink, and that did not happen, as the case with number 9 that had a giant stem and it floated. Give me reasons why. It is not just a yes or no answer for number 6. Okay, so once again, pictures of all your acorns close up or on Google Classroom for you guys, but hopefully this video will help you finish up that little activity as well.